Good morning, Timothy. I was so much hoping to get the last move of that dance, and something happened. I think that, well, there is a lag in the streaming time. Apologies for this. And good morning to everybody who is watching us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, or listening to us in Clubhouse. Good morning, Janusz. It's a pleasure to have you with us again. And well, it is March the 30th, almost the end of March. So we've got only one day left of the month. And we are here with Timothy Langley once again, who is reporting from Katsuyama during this 216th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One. Timothy.
216 episodes, Maya. Congratulations.
To you too.
This is the last weekend in March. We have survived March. We survived February, surprisingly enough. We have survived March. I mean, I guess, until tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day of March. And then we move into April. It's supposed to be spring. I don't know. Today, Friday was very much like summer. And then yesterday was very much like winter.
Yes, it was a real winter day. The temperature here, the highest temperature in my part of town was like maybe 9 degrees. So, and it felt much colder because of the cold wind, because of the rain, and it was something we didn't expect. But it's spring, so that's what happens in spring as well.
That's great. And so there's so much going on throughout the world and throughout Japanese politics. Let me get right into it and then turn it back over to you, Maya. The yen closed out, Maya, at 150 to the dollars to the yen on Friday. And so we're seeing this significant decrease in the value of the yen. And there are a couple of reasons for that I'd like to get into later. The lower house has passed the budget on March 3rd or March 4th. They passed it to the upper house. The upper house has been finagling with it. There's been a lot of dispute and controversy. They will pass it tomorrow. There will be a budget committee meeting. Then there will be a full conclave of the upper house where they will vote on it, everybody in their regalia in the upper house chamber. And then swiftly it will go to the lower house because the lower house must pass it again because there have been amendments. And so that will be a very busy day tomorrow, but they will squeak in under the deadline, March 31st, and they will have a new budget for 2025 by the deadline, which is April 1st. There was a state visit by Brazil President Lula on from maybe Tuesday until Thursday or Monday till Thursday, a very long visit. A state visit. He visited with the emperor and had a summit with the prime minister. Maya, it's been 80 years, I'm sure you'll remember, since the hostilities in the Pacific ended. And so there are a lot of events going on to commemorate that. The prime minister has said he wants to commemorate it this summer probably in August at the cessation of hostilities. But there's a lot going on. Also, the Battle of Iwo Jima and the Battle of Okinawa started on this week 80 years ago. There are continuing controversy over the campaign contributions law. All of the parties promised that they would pass it before the end of this month in order to pass the budget. And so that was kind of a key commitment that the LDP made in order to get everybody kind of tap down the temperaments and get the bill passed through. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, and I'd like to get into the hows and why it's not going to happen and why that's important. Myanmar was hit, everybody knows in the world, with a 7.7 earthquake on Friday at around lunchtime. There have been aftershocks nonstop ever since then. I think more than 1,600 people have been killed, but those numbers are expected to go higher. The support for the Ishiba administration is now lagging at around, depending on who you talk to, 27%. It looks like it's going to not strengthen, but with the passage of the the budget, things will change into a different gear. This will be a different week of Japanese politics once we get through Monday. So stay tuned for that. And it's 211 days, 3 months, a little bit more than 3 months until the upper house election. That is also the Diet session ends at the same day that the Tokyo Metropolitan Government has their elections for I think 128 seats there. That's going to be a firebrand, and there's a lot of competition going on there because that's a precursor of what's going to happen in the upper house election and potentially trigger a lower house election too. Back to you, Maya.
Thank you, Timothy. And well, before we continue with the details and the weeds as well, going into the weeds, what I mean. So, okay, I want to say thank you to our first sponsor today. And once again, that is Kanchu. If you have found them online, you also know that they're there as known as Kanchu.com. And you can find them also via James Howell, who is working for them and representing them within the English-speaking community and also the Japanese-speaking community here in Japan. You can connect with James at Kanchu.com and talk with him if you have any projects in mind in the areas of buying and selling real estate in Yokohama, real estate investment, and property management. If you haven't connected with James on LinkedIn, please reach out to him. That's James Howell on LinkedIn. Or also you can send him an email and talk with him about any projects you might have. So Timothy, once again, it is back to you. Let's see what is going on with a little bit more detail.
Okay, great. But before I get into that, Maya, just an administrative point. We decided that we were going to also begin promoting our synopsis on Substack since last week. We published the Substack, the synopsis on Substack this last week and got really a very good reaction to it. Previously, and up until now, we've been using and heavily reliant on LinkedIn to proliferate the notes of the briefing that I have every Sunday. And we've noticed that those hits are not going. They're not going to the audience that we thought that they were going to. And there's a big controversy going on now among people who have been reliant on LinkedIn to get messaging out and to talk to their network. And so we've decided to include Substack. And the reaction last week was really very, very positive, Maya. So I want the audience to know that going forward, we're going to continue to publish the synopsis on LinkedIn. But over time, probably until May, that will diminish, and then we'll go purely with Substack, Maya?
Yes, with Substack, and it turns out that actually we do not have to rely on subscriptions from the mailing list, and everybody who has subscribed so far for the email, because we can import the mailing list into the Substack and send the email as a newsletter to everybody who is already on the mailing list. If you haven't subscribed yet, let us know and we'll put you on the mailing list there. And Timothy, once again, back to you.
Great. Thank you very much. As I said earlier, Maya, the dollar closed, or the yen closed at $150.06 to the yen. This is a significant decrease. The depreciation since February. So we have a briefing here every weekend, every Sunday. But going month to month, the depreciation is rather significant. They were around 148. The yen stood at 148. It was stronger than it's been in maybe 5 months, just this last couple of weeks. And it's depreciating. There are a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, the U.S. trade policies coming out of the Trump administration, the tariffs and the imposition on Venezuela oil and gas has had a reverberation on Tokyo as well. So there's that. And also the previous strength, people were expecting that to continue. And so the Bank of Japan having a comment on the yen value has also hit inside the parliament too. People are commenting about that. And so it begins to affect the markets as well. Venezuela oil and gas is less than 1% of the imports daily for Japan. In 2027, Japan and Venezuela had a 15-year agreement sponsored by Marubeni and Mitsubishi to supply 20,000 barrels of oil a day to Japan. And although that only contributed about 1% to the entire energy mix of Japan, the Trump tariffs of 25% on companies who import Venezuelan oil has a ripple effect in Japan as well. So there's a lot of consternation going on. There's a lot of debate. The prime minister has sent his emissaries to the United States since, I think, Thursday. They've been in discussions on how to diminish the impact of these tariffs and maybe carve out some deals there. There's a lot going on, not just with the tariffs, but also with the share of defense spending and that sort of thing. So the defense secretary, as you might know, is in Japan now, was here since, I think, Friday. And I'd like to get into that a little bit later in my briefing. The upper house vote to pass the budget will be tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day of the month. It is the deadline for the budget to pass the diet. It hasn't passed the lower house yet. So typically, for the last 29, 30 years, the budget went through the lower house, it went to the upper house, and it immediately became law on the 31st or on the 1st of April. This year, since the LDP and Komeito, the coalition there, doesn't hold a majority in the lower house, and because of that, the lower house passed a budget, but it contained some amendments when it went to the upper house. Now the amendments they've been chewed on for the last 30 days in the upper house. That bill passed by the upper house needs to come back down to the lower house to be approved. We expect it'll be approved without too much controversy. The LDP and Komeito coalition formed an alliance with Ishin no Kai. They received 38 votes to pass the budget. So that looks like that agreement will hold steady. So when the budget bill passes the upper house, I think what's going to happen, it's going to go to a lower house full meeting in the lower house. They're sitting there waiting. They're going to wait for the upper house to pass it, and then immediately they will pass it in the lower house, and then it will become law, squeaking through that deadline. It's not quite a feather in the hat of the prime minister, but had he not been able to achieve this, it would have been a very significant black eye and something that, just another one of those rocks the opposition party could wield and throw at him for a failure of leadership, a failure to, pass the budget. It hasn't happened in so many years, and probably this is the first time it wouldn't have passed. So it's a record 115 trillion yen budget. That's about 765 billion US dollars. That's an enormous budget. It's the largest on record. Let me see. It was a torturous process, as you know, if you've been listening to the program here. It's not quite finished yet, but maybe by tomorrow, the fat lady will sing the song. And so the LDP was able to agree with Ishin to get their 38 votes on agreeing for education subsidies, plus the Democratic Party for the People. They insisted on an increase in the annual taxable income. They wanted to be able to have a tax-free income up to 1.6 million yen per year. They got something close to that, but that was a real hanging point. The Constitutional Democratic Party was pushing for medical subsidies to be paying for major medical expenses. That didn't go into the bill that went to the upper house, and people complained about that. So that's one of the amendments to the bill that the Constitutional Democratic Party was able to extract. But like I said, it has been a very torturous process. It's taken up a whole month and a lot of controversy as a consequence of that. So the prime minister, as his approval rating shows, hasn't really done very well as a consequence of that. It's not completely his fault, but yeah, kind of. He is the one that called for the election in October that ended the LDP's prominence. and has ended up in the situation that we have now. And it's likely to continue in this kind of tone until the upper house elections. Let me see. Wednesday, the prime minister also made things a little bit difficult by having lunch with his counterpart, Mr. Saito, in Komeito. So they're in the budget hearing. They decided to have lunch together. They went to lunch, and the prime minister was trying to reassure the chairman of Komeito that he has a plan. He's going to energize the economy. He's going to make sure that those people in the regional districts and also those people below a certain economic wage are going to receive help from the government. And immediately after that lunch, of course, the press were there. What did he say? What did you say? What was going on there? And Mr. Saito said, well, yes, apparently the prime minister is planning on a supplemental budget to enhance, the economy and to get things going very well. And the press took off with that and said, the prime minister is planning, even though we're still in discussions on this budget, for an additional supplemental budget. He's talking out of both ends of his mouth. And this is really going to, and it caused such great confusion. This was, as the budget hearings were going, the budget had not quite passed. It was really poor timing. And the chairman of the Komeito kind of apologized for blurting that out and causing such a controversy. But the prime minister had to go back on the hot seat and explain why he said that. He got a huge grilling by Ms. Tsujimoto from the Constitutional Democratic Party, not just on that issue, but also on the tariffs and the Japanese response to the Trump tariffs. And what are you going to do about it? And the economy is going to go down. And so it was a really tough week for the prime minister. And it wasn't just his handling of the budget committee. He had lots of other things going on too. There was the state visit by the Brazilian president, and also Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was here in Tokyo, and also the prime minister traveled to Iwo Jima for a ceremony there on Thursday. The other thing that came up this week that really scarred the prime minister and maybe Japan-China relations is, you might remember that this time last week, China, South Korea, and Japan held an economic summit of sorts at the New Otani Hotel in downtown Tokyo, very close to my office. The police presence was very huge, as you could imagine. And they talked about, better cooperation. We had, the Trump tariffs in the background. So I think the Chinese astutely saw an opportunity to kind of develop more of a warm relation and, maybe develop some avenues that were had been closed before. At the end of that, the prime minister met with Foreign Minister Wang on the first day, which was Friday, and it continued to Saturday. And in the public pronouncement of Mr. Wang about the summit and about what the Japanese said and what was going on, he misquoted the prime minister by saying that Mr. Ishiba said that he supports, China's claims and China's stance on historical issues and on their stance on Taiwan in a roundabout way. And this caused a huge firestorm because the prime minister didn't say that, and it kind of carries more significance by being kind of characterized that way. It went on to the webpage of the foreign ministry, and the Japanese foreign ministry immediately complained about that, raised a big stink about it. And as far as I know today, that statement still stays on the Chinese webpage with regard to the economic summit that occurred this time last week. So there's a bit of a brouhaha going there. China and Japan should be on a more even keel, but you can see that there's tension there, not just, diplomatically, also military and through the Senkaku Islands. And there's also a show of force going on in the Philippines area with the United States, Japan, and the Philippines navies doing joint exercises. So it's a pretty big situation that's going on there. In fact, when they were talking last week, the prime minister really emphasized return those Japanese businessmen who have been arrested on espionage charges. Please return them back to Japan so that they can be with their families. They're not spies. I think that this is a mischaracterization. And he also said it would be really appreciated if China could lift the restrictions on importing Japanese foodstuffs, and particularly food stocks, as a consequence of the Fukushima nuclear reactor disaster and the release of tainted water or treated water into the Pacific Ocean. And let me see, once again, the upper house will pass. It is scheduled, will pass the budget tomorrow. It requires a full house vote. So on television tomorrow and in the newspapers the following day, you will see that there's a full house. The emperor needs to come in to open the house. So there's people will be dressed up. It's a big deal for the Diet to get together like that. I'm sorry, the emperor will not show up. He doesn't need to go that because the Diet is already in session, and passing this budget is already a point of legislative domain. So it doesn't become law until the lower house passes, as I said earlier. And so I believe currently that the lower house will meet at the same time. So that means the Diet complex is going to be packed with people. I mean, it was packed with people this last week with the state visit of Mr. Lula or President Lula from Brazil. But both houses, that's a lot of politicians, their secretaries, the cars. It's going to be a very momentous day tomorrow. And so that means that the prime minister will have been successful if both houses meet tomorrow for having passed the budget. One of the three things he needed to do to remain as prime minister, he needed to form a relationship with the president of the United States and make some sort of a bromanship overture. He did visit with him. He was able to have a one-day meeting with the president and his staff. Number two, he was supposed to make some sort of a concession, some sort of an alignment with one of the opposition parties. It was really difficult when it first started. That was one of the things he had to do in order to achieve or to maintain his premiership. And then the third thing he needed to do was be able to pass the budget by April 1st. And so it looks like he's achieved all three of those in his arrangement with Ishin no Kai. But it's not a gold star day on any of those issues, as we know. President from Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, visited from Tuesday until Friday, a state visit. It was full of regalia. The state visit included a visit and a meeting with the emperor and his wife, actually, Empress Masako. Also, President Lula brought his wife and a huge entourage. They had a huge business delegation that came with them. They signed more than 40 business agreements and commitments. So trade between Brazil and Japan is very robust. They met at the Akasaka Guest House. I think you know where that is. It's in Yotsuya. They did have a kind of a summit of sorts there. Mr. Ishiba was in attendance. That was on Wednesday. So if you see the prime minister on TV going, into the prime minister's residence or on TV, he looks really a little bit haggard and tired. And you can see that this is all weighing on him. I mean, this is a huge schedule that he's got just this last week with not just the budget hearings and then the Chinese visit and then the brouhaha that was caused there. And also Mr. Hegseth from the United States Defense Department traveling through the region and here in Tokyo today. I believe he's still here. And then the state visit of Brazil. Brazil is an important trading partner for Japan, and it commits more than, the joint trade between the two of them is about $6.7 billion US dollars trade going back and forth. About half of that, a little bit less than half of that, is on the Japan side. So Japan is sending about $3.5 billion of trade and exports, mostly automobiles, machinery and parts, and high-tech items, and receiving in return ore, minerals, gold, steel, and foodstuffs. A lot of beef and chicken come from Brazil, and almost, not quite all, but about 60% of the ethanol that Japan imports and uses in its energy mix comes from Brazil. So that's a huge trade partner. And it looks like that they've signed a 5-year commitment to meet more regularly, maybe once every 2 years, heads of state to meet and to kick off closer business. Importantly, on security and climate change, and on security, climate change, and on trade. So pretty big deal, and it's always a big deal when there's a state visit, but here with Brazil, it was doubly important. Today, Defense Minister Nakatani Gen will meet with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. They visited on together, I think it was Thursday, in Iwo Jima. And also, the Prime Minister went as well. This is pretty big. This is the first time for a Secretary of Defense to visit Iwo Jima on this anniversary. The end of the Battle of Iwo Jima was on Thursday. The Secretary of Defense is traveling through the region. He's Hawaii, Myanmar, the Philippines, Tokyo, and one of the other island nations, to beef up and to continue the strength of the U.S. presence here, but also to talk about, pay your fair share. And those are the discussions that are being held here. But in addition to that, for him to visit Iwo Jima for the ceremony there, the Secretary of Defense for Japan, Nakatani, also going, but also the Prime Minister going, is a pretty big deal. But also you can imagine the strain and the logistics of getting the. I mean, it's still a piece of. I don't know if it's administered by Tokyo still, the Tokyo metropolitan government, but it's kind of a no-go zone. You can't go there as a tourist. You can't visit it unless you have special permissions. But this is a pretty big deal. Also, it's 80 years during that time, this week, that the battle for Okinawa also began. So the battle for Okinawa began on Tuesday. The Battle of Iwo Jima ended on Thursday, and the Battle of Okinawa went for 90 days. So that started on Tuesday. And I don't know, probably most of you know, that was the biggest battle in the Pacific. 200,000 people, 200,000 soldiers died. 2/3 of those were Japanese, and 1/3 were American servicemen. But 1/3 of the entire population of the Japanese who lived there, the Ryukyu people who lived there, were annihilated. They were killed as well. The mortality rate for Japanese soldiers was 70% throughout that 90-day campaign. And so it left a lasting scar. And as a consequence of that, and not just what happened in Iwo Jima, but Guadalcanal and the kind of warfare between the United States and Japan, and the Banzai attacks and stuff like that, the United States decided that land assault on the mainland was not an option, and they came up with Hiroshima and Nagasaki as the end result. And so after the Battle of Okinawa, less than 3 weeks later, Nagasaki and Hiroshima happened, and then in less than 10 days, unconditional surrender, and now we are where we are now. But we shouldn't forget that sort of sacrifice and that kind of torturous history that we've had as a country, and as bilateral relations flourish. It's interesting to reflect on that. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is an interesting piece of history. Issues to watch coming up, assuming the budget passes tomorrow, and there could be a little bit of a I don't know, a controversy tomorrow in passing it, but that would just be for scoring points, as has been the last 30 days. We're kind of not very far beyond where we were when the original budget passed, from the lower house to the upper house, but a lot of traction has been made by the opposition parties, less so by the LDP and Komeito. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. But the campaign contributions was one of the legislative promises that the LDP, Komeito made to the opposition parties. We will do this by the end of March, and it's not going to happen. So there are three camps. One camp says no political contributions, it should be completely outlawed. And the other side says, well, we should allow political contributions as in the past, and just disclose who is making it and make some sort of a threshold so that there's a little bit of transparency. And you can imagine who is promoting that one. And then there's a middle of the road that says, let's have some transparency and let's reduce it, but not as high as 10 million per year, 10 million yen per year as a contribution. And beyond that, then you have to disclose somebody. That doesn't make any sense, but it's been far worse than that in the past. But the legislation is demanded by the people because of this controversy that we've just kind of emerged from. Hopefully it's in the back seat now, where the politicians were pocketing some of the money that was developed by campaign contributions, which ended up resulting in the LDP losing their majority in the lower house. So this campaign contributions law was promised by all the parties to be addressed before the end of this month, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So it's going to be kicked down the road. Komeito and the Democratic Party for the People hold one position, and Komeito is in coalition with the LDP. So you can see that there's a little bit of a fracture going on there. The LDP obviously opposes any ban on corporate donations, but seeks a higher threshold of 10 million yen annually and then disclose. Nobody quite likes that. The Constitutional Democratic Party, Ishin, and the others want a complete ban on corporate and organizational donations. And as it stands right now, it looks like people like me, not a Japanese citizen, going to political campaigns and the Benkyokai and that sort of thing will be excluded because it looks good on paper that foreigners and large organizations cannot do that. If you're going to be going to the Benkyokai, you're going to be contributing to political campaigns, which this is being characterized as, then you need to be a Japanese citizen, and it needs to come out of your own pocket, and there needs to be some reporting responsibilities there. But if that happens, then that law will go into effect this time next year. And then the prime minister can be seen as dragging his feet on that. The reason why we couldn't close it up is because the prime minister is really reluctant to accept even Komeito and the Democratic Party for the People's softened requirement, not a total ban, but allowing for some of it. And the LDP is just not having any part of it. Let me see. The parties are lining up for the upper house election. So it's important to remember the whole game changes after tomorrow, April 1st. You know, the gloves come off and people are now gearing for the upper house election. It's 211 days away. And interestingly enough, this diet session ends on June 22nd. That is the same day as the metropolitan government holds their elections. So there'll be a campaign period and then the election the same day that the diet ends. The diet ends, and then several days later, probably on, let me see, the diet ends on the 22nd, and campaigns for the upper house start, I think, maybe 6 days later. And campaigns for the upper house run, let me see, they run 17 days, and campaigns for the lower house run 12 days. So the lower house elections, the upper house elections will start on the 26th of June, and then the election time will be 17 days later in the first week of July. Who knows what's going to happen as a consequence of that, but everything relies on what's going on with the Tokyo Metropolitan Government elections, and that is going to have a kind of a sense or a wind towards what's happening in the upper house election. And if the opposition parties smell blood in the water and they see that they have an opportunity. They've already talked about a no confidence motion if the surname law is not adopted to the liking of the Constitutional Democratic Party. So the Constitutional Democratic Party holds a lot of sway. It is the largest by far opposition party. And if there is a no confidence motion that's lodged, for it to be successful, the Constitutional Democratic Party must be a participant there. So getting that pass is difficult. All of the opposition parties and some of the LDP members need to join in on that for that to be successful. A lot of people say that that is not likely, but we're just getting into the game right now, starting on Tuesday. So please stay tuned to that. This next week will be very active, and so please stay tuned for our briefing next Sunday, as there should be a lot of fireworks this next week. Maya, let me turn it back over to you. Oh, I love it when you do that.
Right. Okay, apologies for this, and thank you, yes, for the briefing. Before we continue with the questions and answers, which we have actually accumulated in Clubhouse and on LinkedIn as well, I want to once again say thank you to our sponsors. This time, the thank you goes to Houze, or also as they are known, Houze Inc. You can find them online and you can reach out to them via email. That's webmaster@houze.co.jp, but also you can talk with them through Hana Urushizawa Howell. Her picture is not here, but I'm sure that if you are in this community in Japan, you have already met her, and you know that she can help you both in English or in Japanese, and in Japanese, in fact. So if you have any projects in mind in the fields of custom home design and construction or commercial building construction, just reach out to Hana or send a message to webmaster@houze.co.jp so that you can talk with them and see how they customize their services to meet your needs in the best possible way. So Timothy, thank you very much for your patience as well. And now we're moving to the Q&A. First of all, I want to say that we have a couple of comments and questions from Cam. So hello Cam, he seems to be in Tokyo at the moment. And well, he says, exciting weekend here in Tokyo. Do you have a sense of how Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's visit is being perceived by Japanese media? This is the first question.
Yeah, thank you, Cam. So it's it's kind of a tense time. So originally, the United States and Japan were supposed to form a joint task force. It was going to be in Akasaka. They were going to have the self-defense forces and the United States Central Command. It was going to move from Hawaii to Tokyo. There were going to be a 4-star general assigned to Tokyo. They were going to be working in cooperation to defend and to protect this region. It was a melding of forces. And I think over the last 2 or 3 weeks, the United States has said, well, we're kind of rethinking that. We're not sure if we're going to be putting that much more money into it. And in fact, we think the Japanese should be contributing a little bit more. And this idea about the joint forces, and I think we're going to keep it in Hawaii. The amount of money that's going to be required, we talked about this last week, Maya, is more than $1 billion this year for that amalgamation of joint forces and restationing and repositioning and building the structure here. And they've decided they're just going to downgrade it a little bit. So I think it's a bit of a disappointment to the Japanese, and also everybody is sitting on pins and needles. What's going to happen next? You know, the reverberations, the tariffs imposed on Venezuela have a spillover effect to Japan, and that has upset the markets too. We always watch the value of the yen compared to the dollar, and it's beginning to decrease and devalue significantly. And it's because of these kind of uncertainties, and also because of the economic impact that they're going to suffer. Although the 25% increase on tariff on automobiles, which goes into effect on April 2nd, is not a huge impact. It's probably 2% impact to GDP, but Japan really can't stand it at this point in time. I mean, it is the economy is suffering. We talk about that all the time. So the fact that Pete Hegseth, he's in the news. There was a big controversy this last week about, the signal conversation that they had that was on his watch. It was his briefing. So he's much in the news, but I don't know. He hasn't had much of an opportunity. He has a persona that's already developed in the United States. He was a commentator on Fox News, so a lot of people know him and like him. He's a Marine soldier. He's done significant time in serving the country. So he has a brand. He has a persona in the United States. I don't think he's very well known here, but he's a good-looking figure. He's young. He's very vibrant and very close to the president. The other thing that's kind of in that mix is the appointment of Ambassador Glass to be confirmed and take his seat here in the ambassador's residence. Right now, Chargé d'Affaires is handling that, but the relations being as they are, we really need an ambassador here as too. But this is the first significant visit of a member of President Trump's cabinet. So that's a long-winded response. I hope it responds somewhat, Cam, but I think the jury is still out.
Yeah, and I think that it sends a positive signal of the visit to Iwo Jima, you said, right? So that visit is really a good move, I believe, on behalf of the American administration. Yes. So we'll see. And I believe that once again, there is also a bit of confusion here because of the tariffs. Again, there is a lot of talk about the tariffs and how they're going to impact the economy here. And at the same time, the move of visiting Iwo Jima, and also us, well, people in Japan expecting to have, finally, to have the next ambassador of the United States here on the ground. We'll see what happens, really. And, well, I'll continue with the comments from Cam. So he says, while much of the world is anxious, speculating about what the second Trump administration might mean for global alliances, here we are on the very ground where two nations once fought bitterly, now standing together as the strongest of allies. Yes, that is indeed very true at this point of time. And well, we continue with a question from Cam. What message does this send to the rest of the world about the enduring nature of America's alliances, regardless of political shifts? So
That's a great question that I think the United States should be observing very carefully. If the United States is going to be doing something like this to its closest ally and making their economy suffer, even though they have good reasons for it, I mean, the defense secretary and the president also said, who writes these agreements? How come we have to protect Japan, but Japan doesn't have to protect us? Who writes these, right? And these kinds of agreements, the United States is really playing the leader role there. And most of these agreements that have been negotiated over decades. So to come in and kind of say, well, it just seems out of balance. It's all in the context of a lot of other things that underpin it. And so I think that there's a little bit of a, bro, come on, what are you talking about? We're supposed to be tight, and our economies are very tightly interrelated. And we've already shipped a lot of our manufacturing processes to the United States to diminish that tension, the trade tensions that we've had for many decades, starting with, Bill Clinton, even going way before that, but the automobiles is a big issue. 28% of Japan's exports to the United States is measured in automobiles and parts that go there. So to have a 25% tariff on those, and I think probably these things are being evaluated. They're the first step in a process, and negotiations will happen, and I'm sure that we'll settle that thing out. But yeah, I think many countries are looking at the United States and Japan and that relationship and how that's going to be settled out, and wondering, what kind of reliance they can have on agreements that are being drafted. it also has some inflection on, we want to kick out Mr. Ishiba because he's not so good. He doesn't speak English very well. Even in Iwo Jima, he wasn't able to have this kind of relationship with Pete Hegseth. They couldn't slap each other on the back. That's not Mr. Ishiba's forte. So we need to get somebody else in. Mr. Motegi is always, championing himself as, I'm a Trump whisperer. Mr. Trump even commented about what a great negotiator I am. And so I'm a good guy for that. And you've got Mr. Kishida, who also was the longest serving foreign minister. He's really good at this. He speaks English. And had he been sent to Iwo Jima, I'm sure that Pete Hegseth would have sent to the president of the United States a glowing report about how how he was handled, what a great time it was, and how his visit was handled in Tokyo. So it's all interrelated, and it's all building to a crescendo that we're headed toward the upper house elections.
Yeah, I wonder actually, and maybe Cam can comment on this. I hope he can. But also, Timothy, what your thoughts are on Japan investing even more into the American economy? Because, we already have the owner of SoftBank, right? He pledged $1 billion investment into the US economy. And I wonder if other companies also pledge investment and actually invest into the economy, whether that would be actually a chip for negotiation between the Japanese government and the Trump administration. But I also wonder, because if Mr. Ishiba is changed, so if he steps down and Japan has to elect a new prime minister, then is there going to be drawback, in all this process of negotiating the tariffs and everything? I think it's we are in a fluid situation at the moment. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And Cam, if you can comment, of course, please do.
So I'll give Cam just a little bit of time to respond to you, Maya. I doubt if he'll come up on stage, but maybe he can write something that's pithy for you. But one of the things that the Prime Minister was just raked over the coals, in the budget hearings this last week. Donald Trump promised to Prime Minister Abe not to touch automobile trade in his first administration. And now in the second administration, he's coming back and he's jiggling things. And I think what Cam is probably going to report to us is it's a different ball game. It's you have to get used to this new realm. The United States is not going to act anymore like the global policeman. It is focused on the United States, and whatever it is giving to other countries, it expects some reciprocity. It expects something in return. It's not going to be like it was before, and that's an uncomfortable time. And I think that's where we are right now with President Trump. Things are being completely reevaluated, and the geopolitical chessboard is changing right now very, very significantly. And I think that activant is Donald Trump and his administration to change things. And it's just that uncomfortable period of understanding what that means and what we can rely on and what's coming down the path.
Yeah, I guess that this, comment of mine, the comment I'm going to make is probably too lighthearted to many people who listen to us. But I believe that a sizable number of the global population is kind of relieved, with the US not willing to be the global police anymore. And of course, I know that in Europe, European nations, they're up in arms and they have realized that they'll have to rely on themselves from now on, which probably puts a lot of pressure on them and, a lot of, let's say, urgency for them to build their defense. But at the same time, it's really, I don't know, we'll see what is going to happen. But I know for sure that some people have voiced their opinions of relief, or their, feeling of relief for the United States actually deciding to keep within their borders. We'll see what happens. And I don't think that we'll get a response from Cam at this point of time. He may have left for the next meeting today. Who knows? Yes. Okay. And then, Timothy, I mentioned earlier that, well, of course, a possible change of prime minister here in Japan will once again add another layer of complexity in the negotiations between the US and Japan. But going or stepping back, so we talked about this earlier, right, in previous sessions, that there were options of having a new prime minister here in Japan. So how is the situation looking right now? Because I think that somehow these voices have been silenced. Or no? Is my impression wrong?
Poignant question, because even on this show, even you and I, we go back and forth. We think it's going to happen. We think it's not going to happen. If there's going to be a change in the prime minister, it needs to happen sooner rather than later. So after April 1st, the budget's passed. The utility of this prime minister has diminished significantly. He's passed the budget. He had the meeting with Mr. Trump. He formed a kind of, not a coalition, but an agreement with one of the opposition parties. He's done what he was supposed to do. It's time to move on. And I think that there is a significant voice within the LDP, and also obviously within the opposition parties, to do that. In order for it to have sticking impact and to have traction, it needs to have, we've only got 211 days or 210 days before the upper house election. So if you're going to do that, do it quickly so that the new leader has a chance to come in, to stake his claim, to make his pronouncements, to show how different he is from the previous administration, and why you're going to want to vote for the LDP, because this is the party that we represent now. So that's on one side. On the other side, you stick with what you've got. There's nobody else that can achieve what the prime minister has achieved so far, not in the number of candidates that we have now. And opinion polls, one of the things that's interesting about Japanese politics is opinion polls really carry a lot of weight because it's a consensus society. So that's why we report on polls so heavily, because they kind of dictate to the politicians when they vote, the public thinks this, so I should think this too, or we should. There are very few people that are going to step out and be rebellious about what the public opinion wants. So if they say kick out the prime minister, they're 55% of the Japanese people who have been polled said, we don't like him. He doesn't represent us. He doesn't look so cool. He looks like he's exhausted. Let's get somebody new and young and vibrant in there. Then it'll probably carry the day. As it stands right now, yeah, it's awful hard to tell because the budget is still somewhat in play. This time next week, I think we'll have a little bit better of a feel, because like I said, if it's going to happen, it needs to happen quickly. But generating that kind of controversy, the LDP, it's such in disarray, and they're having another prime minister, and there were 9 candidates before, and there'll still be a number of candidates. Kobayashi Takayuki is not going to sit still if there's another race for the leader of the LDP. He's not going to sit still. Sanai Takaichi, she's not going to sit still. Konotaro, so these people, they see an opportunity there. Yeah, it does generate confusion, and the opposition party can say, see the LDP, you don't want to vote for them because look at them. They can't even figure out who their leadership is going to be and what their policies are. So it's very much up in the air. Next week, let's spend a little bit more finer time on that. But I think over the passage of this next 5 or 6 days until we meet again, a lot will be revealed to us.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, I do think that Cam is probably busy right now, and we cannot get his opinion to this. Maybe next time. So, in the meantime, I want to read a question to you from Hiroaki. Hiroaki, thank you very much for tuning in. And it is, what do you say about US's plan of reconciliation with Russia and the view to France's move to back Ukraine military? Will Japan have any role in Ukraine defense or economic assistance?
What was the last part?
Will Japan have any role in Ukraine's defense or economic assistance?
Okay, so Hiroaki just wants to try and get me into trouble, I think. So that's why he asked me that very pointed question.
Mm.
Let me reflect just a little bit. There was a time when Russia and the United States were good friends. And wouldn't it be wonderful for diplomacy and geopolitics were that to return, for the United States and Russia to be on friendlier terms? And I think the reason why they're not is because of the perception and the actions of Mr. Putin. He's essentially a dictator. He's been guiding the country for the last 15 years. He's got a strong grip on it. He's still vibrant and young, and he's still determined to achieve his goals. But it sure would be nice if the United States and Russia were on friendlier terms, and the geopolitics between the United States and China diminished because of that. But you got to give the president some credit for trying to broach that and to kind of end the war in Ukraine. It's not going to end unless somebody steps in and says, let's stop this now. And nobody is. Only the president of the United States has stepped in and said, I'm going to end this war one way or the other. With regard to, was it France going it alone, or maybe even Japan continue?
Yes, to move back. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. France backing the Ukraine military.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good gamble. They've already depleted a lot of their military resources. And it's just, if the United States is not part of that combination, it's just not going to work. The French and the Germans, they're not going to, collectively, they're not going to be able to pull that off. And with regard to Japan, Japan is only helping with non-military aid. It is sending a lot of equipment, but it's mostly of a non-defensive nature. It's offensive. It's defensive in nature. It must be because of the Article 9 of the Constitution, but it's not heavily, the Ukrainians are not heavily reliant on that. Mostly it's just in the form of money that Japan contributes, but that's because it's, siding with the United States policy on supporting Ukraine. So there's still this legacy of the Biden administration, the Japanese Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs is still holding on to that. We've only had, less than 100 days with the new administration to accommodate the new Trump policies with regard. So I think there's a little bit of catch up there. And also with, the defense minister, Pete Hegseth, coming to Japan and having these discussions, I think there'll be more clarity now. But yeah, there is distinctly a shift going on. And I think it's just a little bit of catch up for the foreign ministry to accommodate, because that's what they're going to do. The prime minister was criticized. The United States is going to impose 25% tariffs, and they're going to do reciprocal tariffs. And what the hell are you doing? We're Japan. What is this? What are you doing? What is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs doing, Mr. Prime Minister? So he's really catching it. And so I think that, in very short order, we'll have more clarity. I don't know if we'll have a full resolution, but I think it's going to happen within the next couple of weeks.
Right. Well, Patricia, thank you. We have a comment from Patricia, which I very much agree with, actually. And we have talked with you before, Timothy, and I know that my opinion is quite unpopular, but I would read out Patricia's comment, and I say that I agree with it. She says, sorry to disagree, but President Putin is far from being a dictator. Others in the government and is regarded as a cautious moderate. Please look more carefully into this dictator statement. And he works with many others in the government and is generally regarded as a cautious moderate. Please, that's what she wrote. So the same thing. Thank you very much, Patricia. I would agree with you. I know that my opinion is really unpopular in this part of the world and in also the western part of Europe. But I think that we have seen that narrative escalating. And of course, we know that there are things, sorry to voice it, and I know everybody's free to disagree with me, but there are things that work in certain countries and in certain cultures, and they don't work in others. And we have seen so far that Western democracies have very heavily tried to impose their meaning and their understanding of democracy onto other countries and other cultures, and it hasn't worked very well so far. One more thing that I always say about Putin is that during his presidency and premiership, he actually managed to increase and to improve the standard of living of the Russians tremendously. And the Russian people do understand that, and they feel it, and they live it. So even though probably the Russian, let's say, democracy is not what we think democracy should be, it's still something that the local people do appreciate, because they have been impacted by it in not the ideology, but the economic standard of living has impacted their everyday lives. So Patricia, thank you very much for bringing this. And I don't apologize to anybody who is listening and who does not agree with me, but things are that we all come from different backgrounds, and we see things through different lenses, and we do need to look a little bit more deeply
Yep.
into these things and appreciate what has been done, not just put labels to things that we don't like. So thank you, Timothy, for letting me voice this. And Patricia, once again, thank you very much for bringing this up. We
Thank
do
you.
need, we do need more different voices about this. Okay, and from Hiroaki, once again, US-Japan car making cooperation, is it possible? Or is it possible to have any trade economic structure or adjustment with the US, and also discussing investments? So, well, Timothy, your thoughts on this?
Well, you're asking me as if I understood what the question was.
Okay, the question is it possible to have a US-Japan car making cooperation? So I don't know what you mean, Hiroaki. We may misunderstood your question. We may misunderstand, sorry, your question here. But probably, yeah. Do you mean mergers and acquisitions between American and Japanese companies, or? Yes, we don't. Okay, sorry. Um,
Okay, well, the only thing I can say is that the Japanese are very good at making a car, a reliable car um, that is suitable for the mass market. With Brazil, that is one of their major exports to Brazil. It's one of their major exports throughout the world. So the Japanese, if somebody were to say, why don't you form a coalition and have a joint venture with the Americans, so that you can build automobiles and they can build automobiles, and it's one company. I guess that's what the suggestion is. Yeah, I don't know if that works. I think even Nissan and Honda, and trying to meld these two companies together, it's almost impossible. The cultures of these two countries, and they're both Japanese. It's almost unfathomable to consider that those two companies could come together without huge disruptions and exodus of workers. And it's just I don't know. I mean, going internationally with the United States and Japan, of course, the United States would like that, because their cars are not competitive with the Japanese cars head to head. And so the United States would love to have the technology, the just-in-time delivery, the way that the technology is embedded in the final product. But I don't know if the Japanese would appreciate that. They'd rather keep their competitive advantage in selling these cars throughout the world. I don't know, but I think that's what the United States is hoping for. If you're going to have cars and you're going to sell your cars in the United States, build them here using U.S. labor. We don't want them imported in, because if they are, then you have to pay a tariff on those.
right. Okay. Thank you very much. It seems that Gabor is here as well, saying that increasing living standards doesn't make a country a democracy. I entirely agree with you, but a country doesn't have to be a democracy for its people to live well. That is, the other side of the coin. And Gabor, thank you very much for sharing your opinion as well. And I think that we do need to look at how different countries function and their ideologies from different angles, and try to understand how it is. So thank you very much indeed. And from Diana Green, we've got another comment here. I feel this is a good question and share your views, the perspective, rather than go along with a possibly fear-based or historic dialogue.
Yeah.
Yes, facts, not just ideologies of past, are in question. Yes, thank you very much, Diana, for this. Yes, we appreciate this. I want to say we are not here to actually discuss what a democracy is and what it means. We're here to talk about Japanese politics. And I apologize for going on a tangent. We try to accommodate your questions and answer them to a high degree as well as we can, and sometimes we just have to digress. So, but thank you very much indeed. And Hiroaki says, okay, maybe the meaning of Japanese and US automakers collaboration means Toyota working with Tesla. That's a novel idea, I think, but I cannot see, how these two companies can work together, not the least because of their corporate cultures. It's really a difficult thing to imagine, but you never know, right?
I don't
Okay,
have.
Timothy, you
I,
don't have anything to say. Okay, good. Right. Thank you very much. Okay, this it seems that we have gone through all the questions today. And Timothy, you can, yes, breathe a sigh of relief. And also, I can see that anticipation, in you of going.
it's I don't enjoy it, and I appreciate everybody that joins us on this briefing and contributes, like Diane and Patricia and Hiroaki. And I really appreciate that. But it is Sunday morning, and I know for most people, you're listening to this as you're having coffee or you're playing with your kids or whatever. And I'm generally very grateful for that. But yeah, it's nice for it to be finished and to get on with my Sunday too.
Right. Okay. Yes, I appreciate that, Timothy, and to everybody who stayed with us and commented. So Diana and Hiroaki, Gabor, Cam, and yes, also we've got who commented today. Yeah, Patricia, thank you very much for staying with us. We wish you a great Sunday and also a bright new week. Enjoy the beautiful cherry blossom season.
Yes.
And yes, the nice temperature today. It's going to be a little bit better. Good morning, Yuichiro-san, Manabe-san. Thank you for joining us. It's a little bit, yes, yes, we are finishing right now, but you can watch the recording of this session. And well, that's all for today. Thanks a lot, Timothy. It's time to also give a shout out to our sponsors. You ready for that?
I'm ready.
Woohoo! Great.